It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, I would like to start with you. It seems like Speaker Johnson is in a pickle, to say the least, as we go into this weekend vote about foreign aid to Ukraine and Taiwan and Israel, as well as Republicans wanting to have funding for more border security. And of course, there are already conservative Republicans that are seeing this as probably an opportunity to get rid of Speaker Johnson. And I just wanted to get both of your takes on it.
I don't know what to say. I heard Mike Johnson yesterday on Jake Tapper talk about how he was trying to uphold the tradition of Ronald Reagan and the Republican Party. Seems to have finally gotten a little religion, decided that he's really the American speaker and not in the Soviet legislature. And is doing what is the right thing, and so that for that reason he's in big trouble in his caucus, because the nutcase caucus is not probably the majority of the Republican conference in the House, even though they've got a lot of votes, but they certainly are large enough to be completely disruptive with only a one vote majority in the House. But all of this sort of sums up to me where today's Republican Party is, and I'll let Craig explain it. Think about this. You got Marjorie Taylor Greene, who until, who 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever she first ran for Congress, was considered a QAnon conspiracy theorist, a nutcase of nutcases. And now she seems to be the face of the Republican caucus in the House. Certainly the most, the most dominant figure in the House. That's one thing that's happened this week. You have the Republican presumptive nominee for president sitting in a courtroom facing felony charges, trying to intimidate jurors. And then yesterday in Arizona, for the second week in a row, the Republicans in the legislature blocked an effort to repeal an 1864 ban on abortion. This party is in a big mess. Look, what Johnson has done is actually, he's given the nutcase caucus what they want, in a sense, because they wanted to have individual votes on all these issues. So he split aid to Israel and aid to Ukraine and aid to Taiwan, and then another security bill, I guess. And he's going to let them vote. And if they want to vote against one of them, they can. So they can go on the record and do whatever crazy things they have to do to satisfy their own constituencies. But that's not good enough, I guess. It's going to be an interesting week. The first thing he has to do is he has to get a rule, or he can't even bring the stuff to the floor. And I think they're planning on a vote on Saturday, which means the rule will have to come today or tomorrow. And he's lost, I think, double-digit numbers of rules so far, because his Republican caucus won't go along with him. And when I was head of the House Democratic Caucus, and even when we had a substantial part of our caucus, the Boll Weevils, who generally voted with Ronald Reagan, there was one occasion where we lost a rule, and it was a big one. But basically, that's a party line vote. And to have, I think, the number 18 sticks in my mind of how many times they've turned down these rules. So he's got to get by that. Uh, what it all is going to depend on is whether Democrats help him or not, because he's not going to have enough Republican votes to pass a rule or pass any of those bills. On the other hand, if they do pass the rule, they get the bills on the floor, they'll pass overwhelmingly. And then I gather his plan is to have part of the rule to combine them all, send them to the Senate in one package, so the Senate can consider it and do whatever they want to do to it. My guess is they'll just take it unless there's something really a poison pill in it, and then the president will sign it. Uh, uh, I think, the Democratic caucus is meeting, I believe, probably as we're taping, to decide whether or not they're going to give him any votes. But I think they are. I mean, I've heard enough Democrats on television the last few days saying that there's just too much chaos, and they will help him out. I mean, look, I think Speaker Johnson deserves credit for what he's doing. I mean, think about it. 6 months ago, he was an unknown backbencher who was really on the fringe of the Republican Party, big January 6th guy who wanted to unravel the election and all that. But he's grown. At least he appears to have grown with the job. He understands now that the speakership is an officer of the country and of the House, not just an agent of the craziest people in his own caucus. And he is willing to put his speakership on the line to do what is in the national interest. He's going to need Democratic help to get that done, but I think in the end he will. Now, whether or not he will be speaker if the Republicans retain the majority is another question. But I think as long as he's willing to keep the government open, as he did a couple of months ago against the interest of his nutcase caucus, and as long as he's willing to do these basic things that are in the national interest, I think he'll probably be all right for the rest of this Congress.
Greg, is this a profile and courage moment?
That exact phrase that came to my mind. I don't know whether it rises to the level of a profile and courage as we think of some other people who have qualified for that, but at least for Republicans, I have to say, that do not associate themselves with the far right in the party, he is standing up. I think if the technology works, I love this image of him, because this is one determined guy. And as Al said, here's somebody who only came to Congress in 2017. He got involved in his with his caucus, and he played a leadership role there, but not one with a great deal of visibility. He's from Shreveport, Louisiana. He graduates from law school in the late 90s, focusing on constitutional law, supposedly. He gets elected to his House, Louisiana House of Representatives seat, which he serves from 2015 to 2016, runs for Congress, gets elected, and suddenly is thrust into this leadership role. And he clearly has skills, because one, he has survived since October 23rd, when after multiple votes and Kevin McCarthy's departure as Speaker, he is thrust into this job. He said an interesting thing the other day. The Speaker said that he had opposed funding for Ukraine, and then he began to get the intelligence briefings. And Al said he appears to have matured, and the speakership is a place where you learn quite rapidly what's happening around the world, unlike you would by being a backbencher in Congress, because suddenly you're in the line of succession of the presidency. You're getting the most highly classified briefings from the intelligence community. He will know for certain exactly what's happening on the front lines of Ukraine. He's met with the Ukrainian leader and with other Ukrainian leaders. And that's obviously been a very sobering experience. And he decided what was right. He has taken the legislation that came out of the Senate and, as Al described, broken it into three parts with a promise for a border security measure. Now, it doesn't satisfy this House Freedom Caucus, and he's always combating that within his Republican caucus. But I think it's important and useful to remember that, according at least to the statistics I saw, the number of members who were in Congress who were members of the House Freedom Caucus totaled 45. And while that's a significant block of votes when the margin is so close, the other way to look at it is almost 90% of the members of the House of Representatives are not in that caucus. And I think one of the things that we're beginning to see, at least in the reporting leading up to votes this weekend, is that many of those 90% of the members of Congress are kind of tired of being the proverbial dog that's being wagged by the tail here. It is a place that's become very frustrating in which to get anything done. And with the assault on Israel, that made aid to Israel more important. With the desperate situation in Ukraine, it makes support for Ukraine more significant. And aid for Taiwan is the third element of this package. So I think that Speaker Johnson has found a way to bring this to the floor. He's clearly locked in negotiations and will be locked in negotiations with members of Congress until they vote, he says, by Saturday night. Wouldn't surprise me that gets pushed into Sunday, but he's expecting a vote on Saturday night. And I'm beginning to think he's got a real chance of passage. For one thing, President Biden came out and endorsed the entire package. That seems to me to clear the way for Democrats in the House to step up and be supportive. And so the things are kind of falling in place for him. But it cannot have been and will not be an easy negotiation. And I think it'll go right to the 11th hour.
Al, moving to New York, we do have a former president who is in court. He's going to be in court for a long time. And it seems like this might be the new Rose Garden strategy, because he won't be able to do anything else but be in court. How do you anticipate the impact of this mini drama?
It will have an impact, but I'm not sure what it will be. You'd think that when you're in court on a felony charge and you're acting like a 3-year-old and trying to intimidate jurors and proven that it's not just Joe Biden who's Sleepy Joe because he's fallen asleep in court. All of those things would have a negative effect, but it probably just emboldens his base even more. But I suspect in the end, this can't help him because we're now in a general election. We're no longer in a primary. We're no longer in a place where he has complete dominance. And even in the primary, as Craig has pointed out, substantial numbers of voters have voted against him. Nikki Haley continued to get votes even when she wasn't on the ballot, or after she pulled out. And Republican turnout has not been particularly good in a lot of those primaries. So I suspect in the end, this will not help him. It goes back to what we've been talking about. You got two nominees who are not very well liked. Trump has not majority support, but has very strong and deep support. The trials probably won't hurt him with that support. And so, but they're going to also make it very hard for him to gain any votes that could put him over the top. So I think, as we've said, or at least I say every week, it really boils down to whether Trump, whether a third party candidate gets enough votes and takes enough votes from Biden in those swing states to give Trump a chance to win in the Electoral College. You know, I think these trials will almost assure that he won't win a majority of the popular vote this time. But he didn't win. He's never won a majority of the popular vote, and he's been president. So that's not really what matters. In any event, I suspect the trial will reinforce his vote, make it impossible for him to grow it. And the question is whether Biden will have a compelling enough, make a compelling enough case to push past all third party potential spoilers, and as he did in 2020, and be able to win the election. I don't really know what more to say than that, because every time you make a prediction about how one of Trump's annex is going to affect an election, you always wind up wrong.
Craig, it's your turn to be wrong.
Well, first, I'd like to offer a spirited defense for napping. I think these past presidential moments of sleep actually offer a great deal of relief. There's no misrepresentation of the truth. There's no verbal abuse or any other kind of abuse. There's no indictable rhetoric, offered. I mean, it kind of is. It's in some ways it's sort of nice having him in court, whether awake or asleep. He's just not out there as much, and so there's some relief in that. Seriously, this just cannot help, because while I certainly agree with Al, it probably for those locked into him and who think the trial is unfair, and no matter the outcome, will disagree with the fact he was even on trial. For Trump, it's worth noting another first for him, since no other president or former president has actually been in a criminal case like this. But this does not help with independent voters, with disaffected Republican voters. It's just more that either turns them off from voting or sends them to an alternative. Yeah. And I must say there were images in the press with Biden out campaigning cheerfully. He loves being back in Pennsylvania, I guess, but the contrast is just remarkable. And so I think ultimately, as some of the polling has suggested, that this whole legal process is a negative for him. But like Al says, it's hard to predict. It also, I think, should be said that if it doesn't take a personal toll on Donald Trump, it's certainly taking a personal toll on his family, on his wife. This is going to be an extremely unpleasant process to relive again, and it only increases the stress and anxiety levels on somebody who's approaching 80 years old and would rather be out at his rallies, and he's not. And he's gonna become, I think, increasingly frustrated. And when he gets increasingly frustrated, he usually lashes out in some of the worst possible ways. So I just don't think I don't think he's helped in any way by it.
Well, we have to leave it there. Al Frum, Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We will see you next week.